Hey guys, Sean here and welcome to the F1 Word. Now, as I'm sure you already know, Daniel Ricciardo is out of contract at the end of this season, and following his victory in Monaco and his stock still rising, there has been a lot of talk about where he will be driving in 2019. So what are his options for next season? First off then, and I guess the most obvious one, is that he could well stay at Red Bull. They've definitely been delivering this season. The car has looked very good, and if it weren't for the issues they've had with the Renault power unit, and let's say the issues they've had between teammates, they and Ricciardo will be a lot closer to the top of the World Championship. The Aussie has been massively consistent in that car and once again appears to have the measure of his teammate and is definitely staking a claim to be the team's number one driver. And when you consider the shifting tone towards Max Verstappen from Christian Horner and Helmut Marko in Monaco, perhaps they're beginning to think that Ricciardo should be the driver they're backing in the short term. Now, of course, Verstappen is the driver they're going to back long term, but removing him from the spotlight, lifting that pressure that's on him, could be massively beneficial for Verstappen long term and also give Ricciardo the opportunity to show what he can do with their full backing. As I said there, that would only be short term, but that could well be a very good option for Red Bull. One move that is beginning to look unlikely for the Aussie is a switch to Mercedes. There were already question marks over whether or not the team would want to look beyond their own driver programme, although Toto Wolff hasn't completely written off the possibility. But Lewis Hamilton made some interesting comments yesterday. He said that he felt it was unlikely that Ricciardo will be going to Mercedes and actually believes that Danny Ric will stay at Red Bull next year. So for me, that's Mercedes pretty much off the table. And not forgetting, of course, that Valtteri Bottas has had a very good start to the season and for me absolutely deserves, at the very least, a 1-year contract extension. One team that the Honey Badger has been most strongly linked to, of course, is Ferrari. In all honesty, if he were to leave Red Bull, I think this move is the most likely to happen. But it's all going to come down to terms. He is not going to want to go to Ferrari as Vettel's number 2. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think Ferrari are going to go down the same route as they did with Schumacher and Barrichello or Schumacher and Irvine. But he would still be the second driver because that is very much Sebastian Vettel's team right now. And let's not forget as well that he apparently has a veto on who his new teammate could be. So, I mean, does Vettel really want Ricciardo at Ferrari with him when you consider 2014? I know there are some question marks over Vettel's performance in 2014 and why he was so far off the pace. Some say it was to manufacture a move to Ferrari. But regardless, Ricciardo still beat him. And if you look back at what Vettel was saying in last Wednesday's press conference, he was very much talking up his relationship with Kimi Raikkonen, and they get on very, very well, and that definitely appeals to Ferrari. And although Ricciardo and Vettel had a good relationship, I think the German would rather keep Kimi there. There has also been some talk as well that given Raikkonen's strong start to the season, he could well be staying for one more year at Ferrari, whilst they effectively wait to see where Charles Leclerc is going to be in a year's time. You might be thinking by now that in terms of the options, that's pretty much it, but I'm going to throw two more in there. First of all, I'm going to talk about McLaren. Now, if Alonso calls it a day, I would be very surprised if McLaren didn't at least try to get Ricciardo. There's all this talk that Lando Norris is on for a seat next season, and if Alonso were to leave, that could leave them with Van Dorn and Norris, and that is a very inexperienced lineup. So bringing the Aussie in will give them some experience and a focal driver, if you like, somebody to keep the sponsors happy. But from Daniel Ricciardo's point of view, why would he move to a team with effectively the same customer deal that Red Bull have, but are a long way off the pace? At Red Bull, he's got the chassis, they've got Adrian Newey designing that car. He knows that whatever engine gets put in that, the car is going to be a pretty decent one. Might not be great in terms of power, but the chassis is more often than not going to be spot on. So although the move would make sense for McLaren, I'm not entirely convinced it would make sense for Ricciardo. And the other option that I want to throw into the mix, and this is going to be a bit of a contradiction on what I just said, but I will explain that, and that option is Renault. This might seem like a little bit of a wild card, but the more I think about it, the more I believe that it actually could happen. Emphasis there on the word could. It would be the same engine as he's running now, and of course, therefore, the same engine that McLaren have. But the big difference is Renault are a manufacturer, and drivers are always more tempted to join a manufacturer team rather than a customer team, even if that deal is a works deal. The team themselves are developing and improving year on year. You just look at where they were a couple of years back. They're definitely making strides towards the top end of the field. Now, a title challenge isn't likely before 2021. In fact, I'd probably put money on it that it's not going to happen. But let's say they go and get Daniel Ricciardo for 2019. They put him in that car, they build the team around him, get him settled into that team, ready for a title challenge in 2021. It's also a deal that kind of works out for all parties. Because if Ricciardo goes to Renault, he's got that manufacturer backing. They've got a driver that they can put everything behind and build around. And Carlos Sainz gets to go to Red Bull to show them what he can do. And Red Bull get a pretty decent driver to replace Daniel Ricciardo. Like I say, unlikely, but you just never know. But I guess that could be said about every team on the grid. So where do I think Daniel Ricciardo will be driving next season? Well, my gut feeling is telling me that he will be staying at Red Bull. Ferrari is very much Vettel's team. The same with Hamilton at Mercedes. It would be a huge gamble to go to McLaren or Renault, and realistically he's not going to go anywhere else. Of course, it is all going to come down to what they decide in terms of the engine, and I think we're going to get more of an indication as to where Red Bull are looking after we see what the Honda and Renault upgrades are like in Canada. All the indications around Formula 1 appear to be pointing to Red Bull switching to Honda next season, so even staying could be seen as a bit of a gamble for Ricciardo. But when you look at the step up in reliability that Honda have made this season, it has been impressive, and they are definitely up on performance as well. If they can nail that, a Red Bull Honda Works team could very much appeal to Daniel Ricciardo. But this is Formula 1 and anything can happen, particularly when it comes to the driver market. But I expect we're going to start to hear a lot more during and after the Canadian Grand Prix weekend. As always, they are just my thoughts and opinions, but what are yours? Have you got a wildcard team you'd like to throw into the mix? And where do you think Daniel Ricciardo will be driving in 2019? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Of course, I will be back soon with more content as ever, but in the meantime, you can follow me on social media. Links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and to Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.